Welcome back, everybody. You should be all dressed up, and I hope you did some writing last night when we were off, and got lots of stuff done. It's just good to be back, and I'm grateful for all of you. Grateful for the speaker. I've known Karen for a long time, and she's just great. Glad to listen to her again. She always has good stuff to say that I never thought of or something. There's always a surprise a little bit. So anyway, I'll do the announcements. The September meeting next month will not be here. It will be at the Science Spectrum. That's at 2579 South Loop 289. Most of you probably already know where it is. I've never been there, but it can be too hard to find. So we'll still meet 10 o'clock, 9:30 will be the meet and greet, and 10 will be the meeting. They have us a nice room, and I think it's going to be great. Yeah, and it has a nice sound system and air conditioner and all of that good stuff. Yeah. We're starting a school drive from now until December. KJ puts a nice list of the things that they're collecting in the newsletter. So if you want to go look at that, they need more than just pencils and paper and stuff. They're collecting empty egg cartons, empty butter dishes, washed, of course. And just the list is good, and you can see what all they need. So if you have anything today, I forgot mine. I had a whole sack of stuff with egg cartons and everything. I left it at home. But you can bring it to the next meeting or something. Well, we'll have lots of meetings till December. Hope you noticed the new banner at the door. Maybe not, because it's kind of late again. But outside, right outside the door here, I mean, not the outside door, but the meeting door. And it's so nice and big, and the graphics are wonderful. Thanks, Sterling, for designing that and ordering. There's a raffle over here. Oops. The tickets are $1 a piece, 5 for 3 busy, or 10 for 7.50. There's lots of things that writers need, and a loaf of homemade bread. So to refresh us when we take a break. We will have lunch today after the meeting at Picasso's and with Karen, and so we need to take a head count of those who are coming, and somebody needs to call and make reservations. So raise your hand if you are coming to lunch. Okay. Okay. I'm not. Okay. That's at 76 Milwaukee, and which is in too far. I wonder if Deb Oh, Deb, do you have a report on that grant writing workshop? Oh, did you,
Yeah. DK and I attended a grant writing workshop, and it was not how to write it, basically where we can apply to it, what some of the things are out there, and other things, all related to writing grants. So we're still looking into writing a grant. Right now, we're looking at maybe the next event, maybe doing the birthday party.
oh, okay.
For grandfather to celebrate how many years we've been in, and also combine it with a membership drive.
Oh.
Our members up and moving. And we're looking at, we would like to have it put on TV. We'd like to advertise it wherever we can. KJ is volunteering to help me.
Oh, okay.
And she's got a lot of information on that too. But,
Oh, okay.
But basically,
Good.
grant writing is still an up-and-coming thing.
Good. Okay. That's very positive, and we can sure use a grant since we're always kind of low on money. Most organizations are. Okay, now we're going to do our 10-minute segment on the author spotlight of our members. And this month is a new member, Jeremy Robertson. So we'll give him a welcome and tell us how you started writing and how long. Okay.
All right. Are we ready?
Do you want to hold this?
Everybody see that? Y'all hear me now?
That's
How y'all doing? Good morning. I started writing back in right before the pandemic started, like in 2015, because I don't know what, I always thought it was interesting. I was trying so hard to find ways to stop feeling so like negative inside, so I was trying to find a way to do something about that, and I find that, you know, creative writing and all that is a great way to, like, you know, I don't know, it just helps, you know, you're creating this new world where these characters can like live and all that, and it's really, I just find it came from, it was in my grandma's blood to tell this bright story, so, after she passed away, it was like 2014, I started like really getting into it. So I went to my computer and I just started. I think I'll be caring about if I get money up there or whatever. I'm just having fun. So you know, you never know. And I came with a lot of fun stuff in my series and everything. So that's kind of why I started writing. So my next question is what motivated you to become an indie writer? Well, like I said, it pretty much runs in my family. My grandma loved stories and telling them. She got me excited about creative writing, and so horror was really starting to bother me there for a while. So if it's not, if it's not humorous or if it's not there's no light, I have no trouble writing about it. You know, so I'm like, I started watching the new movie on Guardian that show on Disney Plus, and I just couldn't get into it. I don't know if y'all started watching Guardians of the Galaxy, but I cannot get into it because it just started killing me. And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So, but anyway, and you, like I said, you can take the story wherever you can go. You know, as long as it's if it's upbeat, positive, fun, light, especially for kids. You want me to say something to the kids. You know, I'm pretty sure I don't put stuff in there that the kids don't really know about. Or so it's like, I mean, yeah, I have like monsters. I create these little, but I make sure you know, just you know, they're safe in it, you know, and, you know, they always find a way out of it, and so it's a lot of fun. You never know what's going to happen to you know, and so it's just like, okay, this is going to happen next. And so, my next question I'm going to talk about is, what's the story behind your latest book? I have it right here, I don't know if you want to see it. It's called Middlebury Monsters. Right now it's off of Amazon. It was traditionally published, but it took about a week to get on there. They proofread it, edited it, and I got this written within I knocked it out within like a month. Once I got into it, sometimes in the morning I like to write, and I write 1,000 words per chapter, and like I take a break and then do whatever to get me excited about writing again, and then because I get stuck, you know, and so I get all this other way, and I get back to I do a little. I'll get back to reading too, and then like in the afternoon, like around 4, so I get back to writing more. So I don't use Word anymore because it took up too much space. I was like on my desktop computer and everything, it would like freeze and everything. So what do we do here? So I realized there's all these apps now, like AI apps. You can go to. I can use them. 2 of them. The first one I used was Living Writer, and it's just a monthly subscription, $10 a month, which is very good for Word anyway. So, but I also use another one called Dabble. Have you heard of Dabble? It's organized, you know, and easy. I mean, it's you know, it's just, you know, easier, faster. Just go online to Dabble and just like start writing. Okay, so this is where I left off. You just go here. So right now I'm using it as a self-publisher. I'm using it as a self-publisher to put it on Amazon. I mean, it's like this publisher like $80 to get it published on Amazon KDP. I have no royalty, but whatever I want to add is like book reviews, readers. It's something that you know will help me. It can give me a negative review, it can be positive, it can be 1 star, 4 stars, whatever. Just you know, you tell me if you don't like it. If you don't like it, you love it, great, you know. But that's kind of what I want instead of royalty money, because that's really like hard to get in, because I can research, marketing, okay, well, you know, marketing, or find a book publisher that can do all that. And just like I just get tired of the computer trying to find stuff like that, you know. It's just you know, something that will do everything. But my other question is, how has Amazon contributed to your success? Well, they know how to professionally make the book products look nice on there. They know how to make it professionally look well, you know, and all that. They know how to make it look good. And they're strict about the reviews. They don't want you to like buy reviews. If they suspect that you buy reviews, they'll like take it down to remove them. So I'm kind of worried about this other place that I found reviews for it. So, but as long as they don't suspect it's fraudulent or whatever, they'll leave it on there. So, you know, but what is the greatest joy of writing for you? Well, I found that writing is a great way to have, you know, creative control, freedom, and I get a thrill every time I finish a book or get reviews from readers or strangers, just out of the kindness of their heart, saying what they thought about it, you know. I find it free and fun as it should be for all writers. What do your fans mean about you? Well, I don't have fans. I don't have like fans. They really do think you, appreciate you for writing this story that they really can't put down. Man, this person, this man or woman, they really support that. What are you working on now? What am I working on now? Let's see. It's another book, another teen composite. I write kids and teens. This one's for like teenagers again. So it's a ghost story. It's a ghost story about this troubled girl who's struggling to feel and fit in with society, and she's having all these. She has this like vision. Goggles, glasses. So she started to see all these. She has. I don't know. It's like it's not like fiction. It's not like it's a little bit different. And it's not. I don't know. Because they just start coming there and asking her for help and everything, like so it's like so I think a town, all of you town, with like a place where like it attracts spirits and stuff. Like so, but I don't know. I'm some days I'm struggling with writing to myself, so I don't know. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on. Ghost story. What are your authors? What started me getting excited was Mr. R.L. Stein back in 1992. I didn't read his adult books because I just, I couldn't, and scary stuff was fun. I couldn't, but there was something about the kids stuff that I really liked, So I got to read Goosebumps, and then he's still, that man is still doing it, so right, so he's got more Goosebumps coming out, so I'm in Disney Plus, bought like 8 episodes of Disney Plus within a year, possibly. I don't know what they're going to do with 8 episodes, all those books, So another one other author I really like is Mary John Kahn. Anybody heard of her? She writes ghost stories too, and there's 2 other authors I really liked. Brandon Mule, I don't know what he's doing now. I've been trying to find stuff on him. He did like Fablehaven, he did quite a bit of big stuff, and not short novels either, but he did like real high quality fantasy stories, and I just like Harry Potter a little bit, the J.K. Rowling stuff. Just her Harry Potter. I can't like her other stuff she's doing, but how are we doing on time? So we done?
Just about.
Okay. One more question?
How many books have you read?
How many books have I read? I've read a lot. I'm trying to get back to reading. It's just I would read a book in bed every morning. I read all the kids stuff, all the scary kids stuff books. I'm reading a book called The Boy with the Witch's Nails. And the cover looks so cool, but I was like, why is that book without a frame? But the ebook is, it's available to buy, so I'm going to read that when I get home. I got like maybe at least 20. Yeah, at least.
That's good.
Yes.
Good.
And I'm going to have this one back on Amazon by the end of the week, possibly. I'm going to email my publisher tomorrow and see how she's doing it. So.
Oh, okay. Does anybody else have a question?
All right. Is that everything?
Okay. Okay. If anyone else wants to do an author spotlight, and let us know what you're writing. writing or something about your career, just contact me. My email is in the newsletter a lot. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Kim, and she's going to introduce Karen.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I'm as excited as I am to get started back. It's almost like the new, I know some people go back to school, and it's like I read yesterday, September is the new January. So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Karen Witemeyer. After growing up in California, Karen moved to Texas to attend Abilene Christian University, where she earned a bachelor and master's degrees in psychology. It was also there that she met and married her own Texas hero. He worked her in good, in fact, for she has lived in Texas ever since. A lifelong bookworm, Karen is living her dream by writing novels. Her books have consistently hit bestseller lists. That's all of our dream. Consistently hit bestseller lists and have garnered numerous awards. When not writing, she loves to pester her adult children, play board games, and cross-stitch intricate patterns reminiscent of the historical eras present in her stories. So please join me in welcoming Karen.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I got up really early, so if I, start snoring or something, just throw something at me, and then we'll be in good shape. So today we're going to talk about humor. I love to laugh. I don't know about you, but there's enough negativity in the world that I think the world needs more reasons to laugh. And so when I write my stories, I try to infuse some humor into the stories. Now, I don't consider myself a comedy writer. I am a historical romance author who has a lot of adventure and, there's angst, and there's, everything that you need for a good story, but I throw in humor as well. And I think humor is something that whether you write fiction, nonfiction, whatever genre you write, humor can add spice to that and can be just another, I call it the monkey wrench in the author's toolbox, right? To add some spice, some entertainment value, right? We are supposed to be entertaining our audience. That's how we draw readers in. And so humor is one of the things we can use to add to that entertainment value. My kids love the Avenger movies. I don't know if you've watched all those Avenger movies. And one of the things that I like about these are not comedies, right? They are big sci-fi adventure stories. But Tony Stark especially, man, he gets those one-liners in there all over the place. In the very first movie, when he first meets Thor, Thor looks at him like, you don't know who you're dealing with. And Tony Stark looks back and like, Shakespeare in the park? Doth mother know you weareth her drapes? He has this big flowing cape, And it's just one of those things that comes up off and on throughout those movies. And to me, that's what makes them extra entertaining. When I talk to my kids and they start throwing movie quotes around, it's the funny lines that they're quoting. Those are the ones that stick with them, that make the biggest impact. So even though we love all the adventure and the blowing up and the aliens and everything else that's going on, it's the humor that sticks with us that we remember. Humor can also offer readers a moment to breathe in the midst of heavy action. It brings a moment of light into dark drama. It adds layers and depths to your characters while increasing their likability. We want our readers to like our characters, otherwise they're going to get sick of the story and move on to something else. Humor brings a smile to the reader's face and releases endorphins into their brain that make them feel good. It's scientific. Readers who feel good while reading your book are more likely to leave positive reviews. And we know those positive reviews really tell a story, because then the next reader who's looking for a book is going to say, oh, this one made that person laugh. I think I'm going to go pick that up myself. They're going to leave quotes from your book on social media, and they're going to search out your backlist to order more of your stories. The best books take readers on a journey that encompass the full range of emotions. In the wise words of 19th century novelist Charles Reade, make them laugh, make them cry, and make them wait. That's the secret to a good book. And I think there's a reason why he mentioned laughter first. He was a dramatist who understood the importance of keeping an audience engaged, and humor is a great way to do that. We do the same with our books, and laughter ramps up the entertainment value. Now, when you start plotting your story, you should have an idea of how humorous you intend for it to be. Is it going to be a serious tale that just has the occasional funny scene in it? Or is it going to really have humor at the core of the premise? If you want to go really big with comedy, you need to set up your plot for maximum comedic potential. Use a trope that is right for comedy. For example, the fish out of water trope. Some classic movies like Crocodile Dundee, Miss Congeniality, My Fair Lady, all of these use this trope to make the humor a big part of the story. They take a character who might be very successful in their own world and put them in a completely different world that's foreign to them, and they're fumbling around, they're making mistakes, all kinds of crazy things are happening to them, and that's right for humor. However, if the story is only composed of a series of silly mistake after silly mistake after silly mistake, that's going to get dull to the reader. So you need to make sure the reader has more than just these funny setup places to get invested in your story. They need to care about your character. If they're always bumbling and looking foolish, that kind of actually hurts their likability, because then you think, well, that's just kind of a moron over there. I don't know that I really am cheering for that person very much. But if you see how much they care about people, or how good they are with children, or how they see things other people in this world don't see, and they can handle that from an intelligent perspective, then you start to really get a breacher with your characterization, and the reader's going to get more invested in that character. So like with anything, humor, you have to have balance with it, right? It can't just be all humor all the time, because then you're losing all the rest of the character development and the plot line. Another way to add comedy on a large scale is to set up a plot that hinges on a conflict that has strong humorous undertones. In my novella, In for a Surprise, the heroine is wanting to design a romantic inn for couples. The trouble is, she has atrocious taste. Now, her indulgent father owns a land development company and assigns his best man to the case to see that she is successful, or else. Now, wallpaper wars ensue. There's lots of opportunity for witty banter and humorous narrative, because the guy that gets assigned to this job, he thinks it's ridiculous and it's not worth his time. And she is just so enthused and so sure that her vision for this beautiful pink, bright pink inn is just, going to bring all the lovers to her place, and he's thinking it's going to be an eyesore, the community's going to kick you out, and so they're having to find ways to work with each other, and it gives wonderful opportunities for humorous conversation, as well as misunderstandings, even as they start to learn that, you know what, they're better together if they bring their own strengths to the team. And so that was kind of a fun story. In 2021, which was when it came out, it's a novella that's in this collection, it won 3 major awards. And I really think it's because of that humor that it elevated the story in readers' minds. Another way to add a healthy dose of humor to your stories is to intentionally feature a humor-forward supporting cast, those secondary characters. Secondary characters don't have as many boundaries as your main characters. They can be outlandish, cantankerous, cute, silly. They can break social conventions, and they can use you as an author need to use that freedom to your full potential. Give them quirks that serve as natural foils to your main characters. If your heroine is serious and responsible, give her a sister who's frivolous and impulsive. If your hero is crazy about horses, give him a best friend who teases him about his obsession. Children and the elder ladies are my favorite. They can be especially useful because they have no filter, right? You've been in situations where, grandma says something and you're just like, where did that come from? I'm so embarrassed. Or, the cute little precocious, 5-year-old that just blurts out, this, that, and you're just like, oh my goodness. It's perfect to use in your stories as a way to add humor and lightness to a scene. So you were talking about Disney Plus. I love Disney movies, And if you want to learn how to do secondary characters right, pay attention to all those classic Disney animated movies. Kids watch these over and over and over again, right? I mean, they can watch it 100 times and they're not tired of it. I think the reason why is because they're funny, right? And if you look at what gets the kids invested, it's usually the side characters that are the funniest, okay? Now, the secondary characters need to be fully developed and they need to have their own goals and motivations. But since they aren't the central focus of the story, you have more freedom to take their behavior or dialogue to humorous extremes. When I think of the classic Disney sidekicks, I see several different types of humor. So from The Little Mermaid, we have Scuttle the seagull, right? Remember Scuttle? Very much the ditzy kind of humor, where, you know, he doesn't know what in the world he's talking about, but he thinks he does, and he's making all kinds of, well, you know, this is a dingle hopper that you use in your hair, and you know, all these kind of things. So very ditzy kind of humor. Then you go to Frozen, right? We have Olaf. And his kind of humor is he's just so cheerfully naive, and he's just so sweet, but he's funny because he's very naive and doesn't understand how the world works. If you go to Mulan and you think of Mushu, the little dragon, he uses humor to hide his insecurities, right? It's kind of a defense mechanism for him. Then I love Cars. Mater, okay, he's the lovable dunce, right? You know, he's just a good old boy, he's got good old country humor, but he's still got special skills, world's best backwards driver, so you gotta love Mater. And then you have Genie from Aladdin, and his type of humor is he's a master of exaggeration, right? Everything is just big and exciting, and he has these really exaggerated facial features and all these kind of things. And that's something that you can use in your stories as well. Exaggeration is a type of humor. And then Beauty and the Beast, one of my favorite movies of all time, because, you know, it has a heroine who loves books, so gotta love that. But Lumiere and Cogsworth, okay, that's the candlestick guy and the little clock guy. Now, they're funny because they are unlikely friends who are very opposites in temperament. And yet they tease each other and play off each other constantly throughout the film. They're always, you know, jabbing each other and putting little one-liners in here and there. They see things through very different points of view, but you can use that in your stories. So, for example, in one of my stories, I have a series that is set in a women's colony. So all the people that live there are women, and we have the main character's aunts, maiden aunts, who she lives with. I kind of made into this Lumiere and Cogsworth pairing. So they're both elderly women. The first thing I did was I gave them unusual names. So we have Aunt Henry and Aunt Bertie. So these are kind of male-sounding names, but actually, in the 19th century, it was very common for women to have male-sounding names, and even for men to have female-sounding names. And so it fit my time period, but it was also a fun way to add humor when you're not expecting, oh, Henry and Bertie are coming. You're not thinking women are coming. And so that, you know, gives you some opportunities for humor. And then I gave them very different temperaments so they could play off of each other. Bertie was the nurturer, the kind-hearted one. She always wanted to feed you, right? If there's something was wrong, let me go cook you, make you something that's going to comfort you, right? Now, if something was wrong, Henry, her sister, she was going to put on her bloomers and she's a suffragette, and so she was just really going to go to town and take care of business. So Henrietta and Alberta were the real female names. So they played off each other, and when the hero in the second book comes to town to meet them, well, he's not coming to meet them, but Henry and Bertie come out to meet him, and Bertie's carrying the plate of cookies because she wants to welcome him with food, and Henry's coming out with a gun. If you cause any trouble, man, you're out of here. And so from then on, in his mind, he's thinking of them as Cookie Granny and Revolver Granny. And so it just kind of keeps going, and you're able to play off of that. So that's kind of how I took some of those ideas from Disney and turned them into something that were characters in my own stories. Okay, so we've looked at the big picture. Plotting, characterization, developing your supporting cast. So now let's zoom in and look at some of those details. I would love to say that I am funny all the time. I am not. I love humor and I appreciate humor just about all the time, but it's not something that just always comes naturally. And when I'm writing, sometimes I have to remind myself, you know, I have to find some ways to add some humor to this, because it's getting kind of dramatic, and it's getting, you know, a little heavy. And, you know, there's a place and a time for heavy and dramatic, because that's when you tug on the heartstrings, right, and you really get into that angst. But we need to lighten things up. I have to remind myself to do that. So even though it's not necessarily something that might come naturally to you, it's something that you can intentionally add if you're looking for places to do that. I will also say that some of my books are funnier than others. Some of them just have to be the occasional line here or there. Others are more intentionally funny from the beginning on. It just kind of depends. And there's no right or wrong way to do that. It's just write what you write and add it when you can. If you are planning, like I said, to make it humorous from the start, you want to start by laying the tone with your very first line, right? So in this story that I was telling you about that won those 3 awards, this was intended to be a funny story from the start. So when I was coming up with the very first line, I wanted to make sure it had some humor in it. So this starts from the hero's point of view. Illogical business proposals made Barnabas Ackerley's skin itch, but this one irritated like 100 mosquito bites treated with a poison ivy poultice. Okay, we have a lot of exaggeration happening there. We also have, I mean, who hasn't felt a mosquito bite? Maybe poison ivy, you know how bad that itches, so you can immediately sympathize with him, right? So it's funny, it's kind of sarcastic in his mind, but it also conveys a lot of emotion in what's going on and lays the groundwork, for what is going to be coming. You sense his frustration, but it's phrased in such a colorful and humorous way that the reader is charmed and drawn further into the story. Now, one of the trickiest parts of trying to write humor is that no two people have the same sense of humor. It is very difficult. Some people love that really slapstick, cornball kind of humor. Others really want the very intelligent repartee. You know, some want the silliness that's just, you know, goofball, and others are looking for something more sophisticated. And it's really hard to meet the sense of humor of everybody, right? You're trying to make your books appeal to the most readers as possible. Well, the way that you can take advantage of that is tie into things that are universal human experience. So that it's not just for this particular person this is funny, or this particular person this is funny, but if you have something that appeals to everybody, and the way you do that is like in the example of that first line, almost everybody knows what a mosquito bite feels like. And so that's something that everybody can relate to. So when you're using places to be humorous, try to have it be something that not only fits your character, because it needs to be in tune with what your character knows and experiences, but also something that's universal, that everybody can understand. Turn my page. Now, I write romance, and one of the big elements of a romantic story is when the hero and heroine meet for the first time. It's called the meet cute a lot of times, because a lot of times there's something unexpected or humorous or dramatic that happens in that moment. So this is a great place to add humor and make the meeting even more memorable. Use embarrassment or unexpected trouble, erroneous assumptions. Use all those elements to their full potential. Physical comedy works really well there too. In Head of the Clouds, which was my second book that I wrote, the heroine, Abilene Proctor, is applying for a position as a governess at a sheep ranch in Menard, Texas. And the sheep ranch happens to be owned by a British nobleman who had come over to start his own sheep business. And, you know, she kind of has built this idea up in her mind, right, that this is, you know, kind of like her Prince Charming, you know, possibility. And so she's coming in, and she has her own horse, though, and she really wants to take care of the horse. It's a very beloved animal for her. And so she, instead of going up to the main house with the rest of the candidates, she takes a detour to the stables to take care of the horse, and she's looking to try to give her some oats before she heads up to the house. The only problem is the oat bin is practically empty, and she's a very short woman. And so she's trying to bend over into there to get that last scoop of oats for her horse. And of course, things happen. So here we go. Pushing up on her toes, she stretched her arms down as far as she could and managed to get a fingertip grip on the scoop handle. The scoop scraped against the bottom of the wooden box as she cornered the grain. It would have to be enough. All she needed was for someone to come in and see her dangling over the side of the feed bin, bottom up. Might I be of assistance? The rich, masculine, and very British voice startled her so badly that she flung herself backwards too fast. She lost her footing and knocked her knees against the bin. As she swung her arms out in a desperate bid to regain her balance, the oats sailed out in a powdery arc and splattered all over the front of the man who could only be Gideon Westcott. The poor man just stood there, stunned. He wore ordinary work clothes like any other Texas rancher and had a strong, capable stance that communicated experienced stockman, not arrogant dandy. He was nothing like she had expected. Consumed with the need to get away before he could chastise her, she thrust the bucket at him. If you'll just see that she gets some water. Then she fled, praying his shock would keep him from recognizing her when next they met. Westcott Cottage did have a handsome prince, as it turned out, and she just floured him like a drumstick headed for the frying pan. So we've got physical comedy going on there. We've got a good last line zinger that ends the chapter that, hits that moment for the reader to enjoy. They want to turn the page and see what's going to happen next when the next they meet, right? So he used several elements of humor there. You had the physical comedy. You also had her own just voice in her head, right? You want to make sure that when you're in your deep point of view for your characters, that they might have some humor going on in their heads, that maybe they're not saying it out loud, but she's already imagining what's going to happen if people come in and she's bottom up on this thing, So you have places that you can add that humor into your narrative. It doesn't just have to be physical things that are happening. Using the character voice is a great way to add sarcasm and funny observations about people, that kind of thing. Witty banter is another fun way to add humor to a story. And it doesn't have to be romantic banter. It can be between two brothers. It can be, between two guys that are in business together. It can be, a group of teachers. It can be anything. But banter needs to flow naturally, not only for you as the author, but fitting with the character's voice and personality. You can create private jokes between your hero and heroine. This can actually add to the romance as they are connected in ways that others are not. Teasing and self-deprecating humor can make your hero charming. Play on words, puns, purposeful misspeakings or misunderstandings, exaggerations or colorful descriptions that tap into your character's idiosyncrasies. Banter can also be used when your characters are at odds. Sparks are flying. The key is to set up the back and forth so that the final response is something unexpected. If most people would react one way, have your character act a different way. That makes it surprising to the reader, and readers are more likely to remember it if it's surprising instead of what it's expected to be. In my debut novel, A Tailor-Made Bride, the hero has made it clear that he hates his first name. Jericho is his first name. He goes by JT. He does not like his first name. He does not want anyone to ever call him his first name. And the heroine, thanks to this guy's sister, has lately figured out what his first name is, and she plans to use that to her advantage. So, in this scene, they are having a confrontation, the hero and the heroine. This is obviously before they are romantically involved. Right now, they are just, kind of at each other's throats. And she plans to use, his real name in this argument to kind of get the upper hand. And now he makes it clear, I do not like it when you use that, don't be doing that. Now, most people in that kind of confrontation, at least me, would back down, right? I would be very polite. Oh, I'm so sorry. I would be apologizing. I would be calling him by the name that he prefers, because that's the nice thing to do, right? So I had to make sure that she did the opposite of that in order to make it funny. JT faced the impudent woman whose eyes issued challenges his pride could not ignore. He prowled forward, jaw clenched so hard his facial muscles ticked. The name's J.T. No, she said, tapping her chin as if pondering some great mystery. Those are initials. Your name is Jericho. Wiggling his fingers to keep them from curling into fists, J.T. reminded himself that she was a woman. He couldn't deal with her the same way he had the boys in the schoolyard. Are you purposely trying to rile me? His voice rumbled with menace, warning her against such a dangerous path. An all too innocent smile stretched across her face. Why, yes, I am. Is it working? So you have it fun, but she's not being ugly about it. She's teasing him, right? And in a way, it kind of adds to the romance because he is so taken off guard by this that he has to actually wonder, who is this woman that can really, take me off my guard and maybe even make me feel better about having this awful name that I really despise? And so you can use it to your effect to enhance the romance as well as just being a funny zinger that happens. So it always needs to be adding to your story, not just thrown in for humor's sake. There needs to be a reason, there needs to be something that adds to your characters, to the plot, to the romance if you have romance going on, whatever it is. Okay, now we all deal with conflict differently. Some avoid it, some face it head on, some diffuse it with humor. Think of Tony Stark again from our earlier Avengers example. He wields humor as well as he does his Iron Man tech. He tosses out clever insults against the villains and drops one-liners with his team members, even in the middle of a battle. And in his quieter, more romantic moments with Pepper, he becomes the master of self-deprecating humor. It is this self-deprecation that makes his narcissism bearable because we realize he's aware of his flaws and he's not above poking fun at himself. So you can use it in all these different ways to add dimension to your characters. Now, while you can have fun with two characters trading barbs and good-natured teasing equally, especially in family situations, I love doing this with siblings, my favorite way to use this type of banter is to make it one-sided. Think of the straight man in comedy routines, right? You have the funny guy, then you have the straight man. Well, the funny guy is a lot funnier because of the straight man. The contrast makes it a more vivid distinction. So you can set that up. Again, I write romance, so that's kind of where I live with my head. So you can have a grumpy hero with a light-hearted heroine, a teasing hero with a shy, withdrawn heroine. Choose combinations that provide the most contrast, and that will help elevate those humorous moments and make them more memorable. Now, I tend to write a little bit funnier in my shorter stories. So in my novellas, they tend to have a little more humor in them. And my latest novella was actually a Christmas story, and this was, in this collection, it's called The Texas Christmas Carol. It is kind of a Texas romantic take on the old Scrooge tale, right? And so, of course, the hero is a grumpy old Scrooge, right? And he is very comfortable in his grumpiness, and he's just going to stay there because that's who he is, and that is what he wants. And so I pair him with the most light-hearted, happy, optimistic heroine possible, right? Her name is Felicity, which she lives up to that name. And so I pair these two kind of as the straight man versus the overly giddy, kind of happy person. And I have a lot of fun with the two of them playing off of each other. And so from the hero's Scrooge point of view, we have a scene that shows his acerbic grump playing off of her cheerful optimist. There's a young woman at the door, sir, Mrs. Bell persisted, and Evans slapped the folded newspaper atop his mahogany desk and was slightly mollified when the housekeeper startled and dropped her sentence with a gasp. He didn't want an explanation. He wanted silence. Send whoever it is away, he ordered. You know I don't accept callers unless they are business associates, and even you must recognize that I don't do business with young women. Mrs. Bell bristled at his poorly veiled insult of her intelligence, and one of her hands found its way to her hip. I tried to send her away, sir, but she refuses to leave. He waved her off with a brush of his hand, slammed the door in her face. That should rid us of her. Try that. Mrs. Bell looked far too smug and party that bit of news, even threatened charges of trespassing, but nothing budges her. She promised to continue knocking until you come to the door. Bah! Give her 5 minutes. She'll weary of the game. His housekeeper raised a brow. I've given her 20. She's still at it. Still at it? After 20 minutes? Evan snatched his cane from where it rested near his office doorway, even though it was more of an insurance policy than an actual need. His trick knee hadn't gone out on him in several months, but one never knew when disaster might strike. And he refused to be humiliated in front of strangers or staff by falling on his face. Besides, the cane made a grand weapon to wave around in a threatening fashion should his unwanted visitor prove stubborn. As he neared the front door, the tapping grew louder, his temper heated in equal increments. When he finally grasped the handle, he jerked the door inward. Cease that infernal knocking! The unsuspecting percussionist lurched forward, but thankfully caught herself before tumbling on top of him. The moment Evan recognized Felicity Wiggins, his relief over the near miss turned to a momentary flicker of regret. One he banished immediately. He spent the last 2 years studiously avoiding personal contact with the fair Miss Wiggins, and he wasn't about to let his guard down now, no matter how her eyes lit at the sight of him. Such a look had to be a pretense. No one actually enjoyed his company, a fact of which she was perfectly aware and not the least bit sorry. Mr. Beezer, she said, her voice ringing with a delight that sounded almost genuine. He hadn't thought of her as such an accomplished actress, but then she no doubt wanted something from him. Women were at their most cunning when they wanted something. Good afternoon to you, sir. Hasn't the Lord blessed us with a lovely day? Evan didn't bother to look at the sky to which she gestured. It's December, Miss Wiggins. It's cold and dreary. Her smile only brightened everything. So you have a lot of fun with these two going back and forth, right? And it was very fun to write his point of view, because I could add a lot of humor with this exaggerated grumpiness, right? And so that was really a lot of fun to get into his point of view. And of course, it's a lot of fun over the course of the story to soften him up as the romance takes off. This story won the Christie Award, which is the highest award in Christian fiction. So I really think having that humor. Oh, I turned myself off.
Oh.
Nope, I lost it.
Uh-oh.
I'll just talk loud. It'll be okay.
You can do it.
I can do it. Woo! Okay.
Oh.
But I really think that humor is one of the things that adds to that story and made it something that was award-worthy. Okay. In our next discussion, we're going to talk about humorous character voice. Now, we just had an example of character voice with this very grumpy. He was kind of self-deprecating. He knew he was grumpy, and he just wanted to be that way. He was fine with that. This is where subtle humor can come into play. Allow your character to think things they would be too embarrassed to say out loud, or to make observations about other characters in the story. You can kind of think of the wallflower who everybody overlooks, in the fancy ball, and she's just sitting there having this great conversation with herself about all these different people and all the crazy things that she knows about them, and you can be really funny with that. One of the ways that's really fun to do that, though, is with the self-deprecating humor, because we like characters who don't take themselves too seriously, right? We like that about people. It makes them humble and approachable, but it also has that spark of humor that is fun. In Honor's defense, so one of my Hanger Horseman books, the heroine is a very introverted, shy personality, and she doesn't like to be around people. But certain things happen in the plot where she's taking care of a nephew, and the hero is wounded on her doorstep. She needs to fetch help, right? And she's going to make herself do it, even though she doesn't. The last thing she wants to do is go and talk to strangers because she's new to town. And so this is how she thinks about herself. She wasn't sure what she might learn in town that Nathaniel hadn't already been told. Men often dismissed women with the same condescension as they did children. Nevertheless, she resolved not to be put off. She'd persevere, even if the thought of asserting herself among strangers delighted her as much as the prospect of being dragged behind a horse by her hair through a bed of cacti. Okay, so it's not just one. We add another, and then we add another. to make it more humorous. Just 1 would have been okay. 2 and 3 makes it even better. Okay, you know how, at least for me, you always think of the perfect quip to make like an hour after the argument is finished. Use that in your writing. It's wonderful fodder. You may not be able to do it anymore with that argument, but boy, you can save that zinger and you can use it sometime with your characters. Let your character run with sarcastic thoughts or wild misunderstandings or humorous observations. Use all of that material. No 2 characters should have the same humorous voice, right? We talk about humor, we talk about voice for characters. Your male characters should not sound, their narrative should not sound the same as your female character's narrative. There should be difference there because they're 2 different people, 2 different backgrounds, 2 different levels of experience. The same is true with humor, right? No 2 people have the exact same sense of humor. So even though you as the author have a sense of humor, you have to step into different skins, right, with your characters to know what kind of humor they would have. And then their narrative should reflect that kind of humor. So my really grumpy Scrooge character is going to have a very different sense of humor than the very light, happy heroine, right? And so you need to make sure those are reflected in your narrative. A humorous character voice is great to use when introducing new locations or situations or even cast members into your story. It's the perfect way to show your POV's character's personality as well as revealing plot issues, but doing it in an interesting way. In this story, more than words can say, the heroine is a baker. She owns a bakery that she inherited from her father, but because of an outdated town ordinance, she's going to lose her bakery because she's a woman. Only men can own businesses in town. So she has decided she's going to find herself a husband, right, so that she can get his name on the deed and be able to keep her bakery. So, at the beginning of the story, she's looking over the people who have come to her bakery to eat breakfast and deciding, you know, are there bachelors here that might be prospects for her? Now, you're trying to get the personal descriptions of these people across, right? But you could just say, okay, he was slightly pudgy, he was bald, you know, that kind of thing. Or you could do it in a more humorous style. So here is how she observes bachelor number 1. Bachelor number 1 sat by the window, bran muffin and tea with sugar. Man and muffin shared a remarkable resemblance. Both a bit squatty and thick around the middle with smooth round tops. Abigail forced her quirking smile back into a straight line. Behind Abby, you might end up married to that muffin man. So you could have just said, okay, he was kind of, you know, short and overweight and buff, but no, you made it much more fun and memorable by adding that humorous voice. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. All right, timing is everything with humor, right? Anything can get old and lose its effectiveness if it's overdone. Pay attention to the story arc, right? My books tend to be funnier in the beginning and then less funnier as it goes on because the conflict is building, you have the black moment coming, things are getting more serious, more is at stake. There's not always a place for humor when all the big action is happening. So that you pay attention to that arc and don't overdo it. But at the same time, sometimes there is a place to lighten the mood when things get too dark. Now, I love to use analogies, and I love to try to make them as non-cliche as possible. But sometimes you can take something that's cliche and give it a fresh twist that makes it funny. So, for example, I had one story where there was a point of view character who was trying to help a wounded man, and somebody was in her way and not letting her get by, and she was getting really frustrated by it. And in her head, she's thinking, you know, the guy's supposed to leave so they can lock up and go. And so in her mind, she's thinking, the irritating man moved as fast as a tortoise stuck in molasses. Oh. Okay? So we have the cliche of, you know, you're as slow as a tortoise, right? But we mixed it up by we add 2 cliches together, you know, getting stuck in molasses and a tortoise, and then we called it fast. So we turned it on its head and we made kind of a sarcastic comment out of it. So you can take little steps like that to take a cliche, turn it around, make it into something fresh that's funny, instead of just the expected run-of-the-mill cliche. Okay, now these principles hold true in community. And so she lived on this ranch with her brothers, and she was kind of lonely. And she was such a sweet girl. I wanted to give her a pet or something to kind of, help her feel loved, And I could have given her a cute little cat or a very loyal dog or even, a wonderful horse. But that just wasn't funny. And so I gave her a big black hog. And, hogs in Texas get shot, right? Because they root up things and they make a mess. So she tied a big red bow around his neck so that hunters wouldn't shoot him and would know that this was her pet. And so that laid a lot of groundwork for funny things. For instance, in the meet cute, like we were talking about earlier, when the hero first meets her, he thinks she's being chased by this wild boar when really it's her pet, and she has to and so you can use that to that potential. But it also played into her sweet side, just in little things. Like she named him Hezi, which was short for Hezekiah, because Hezekiah was a king in the Bible, right? And so it was her thing. Even a lowly pig deserves to be treated like a king. So you see her personality come out with that. So use even these big things that aren't like those little zinger moments. The big overall picture can still have these humorous overtones to it just by the choices that you make and how you populate your story. Running gags is another thing that I've used. Going back to my very first example with the inn that we had that she was trying to build, and the hero was like, this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard, how are we going to make this work, but my boss is going to fire me if I don't find a way to make it work. And so, because he thinks this is a really bad idea, the inn she's wanting to build it right next door to this big giant oak tree that the town calls the kissing tree. Because it's where courting couples go and they carve their initials in the bark, right? So all over you have these little initials and heart shapes and all this kind of stuff. So it's called the kissing tree. And she's a romantic at heart, and so this is why she wants to build this inn there for romantic couples to come and visit. And it's going to be called the Kissing Tree Inn, because it's right next to the kissing tree. Well, since he doesn't like this idea, throughout the story, especially at the beginning, he starts naming it other things in his head. Now, he's very careful to never say it out loud, right? It's just in his head. So these are like the running gags that goes through this story. He calls it the idiotic inn of kissing, the inn of smooching shrubbery, the inn of osculating topiaries, the inn of unfortunate pinkness, the inn of wooing woodery, and the inn of pecking pulp providers. So it gets out of hand, right? And of course she eventually finds out about it because he had written something down and she finds out. And thankfully by then they've already kind of formed an attachment. So she laughs about it. It becomes this kind of inside joke, kind of thing. But it's one of those things that it became a running gag throughout the story. And I think the thing that made it work was it was slightly different each time. If it was just the same thing over and over again, it kind of loses its spunk. But if you find ways to make it fresh and give it a little twist each time, that's what makes the running gag work. Now I mentioned, this is my last point, I mentioned earlier that I tend to write funnier at the beginning and then less funny towards the end when all the conflict is really big and you have your black moment and all that. Occasionally you can use humor in a way that it's really for the reader. It's not for the characters. And so in a way to kind of lighten up a black moment. In this story, To Win Her Heart, the heroine has just learned that the hero has a criminal past that she knew nothing about. So she had been falling in love with him, thinking he's this wonderful guy, which he is now, but before he had this trouble. It's kind of a prodigal son story, right? So he turned his life around, but now she's found out about his past, and she's very upset about it. And there's a character, a secondary character, who is trying to talk some sense into Edith. So this is, Chloe is kind of she was raised in a saloon, she doesn't she doesn't hold back any punches, she'll just tell it like this. I ain't gonna let you sit up here and fester anymore, Miss Eden. You've done enough of that already. You ain't just hurting yourself now, you're hurting Mr. Grant, and I can't let you do that. How dare the girl invade her bedroom and throw accusations around? As if Levi were the wronged party. Oh, and Mr. Grant is perfect, isn't he? No, ma'am, he ain't. Chloe's quiet rebuttal brought Eden up short. I don't know what he said in that letter that got you so riled, but And if you can't see the good man he is, you need to unscrew them eyeballs of yours and try on a different pair. So again, it was not meant to be humorous when she said it, right, for the character, but it's humorous for the reader. And the reader is going to remember that, and it's going to make an impression. And it also lightens up the moment a little bit. So all this black moment now has a little bit of light that's been added to it. So use those secondary characters, right? She's a quirky secondary character. Use them to really amp up the humor of your stories. Okay, so that's basically all of my tips on humor writing, and I would love to take questions or answer anything that you might have.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have an author friend of mine whose main character is very sarcastic, but it's a funny sarcasm. You know, you can have mean sarcasm, but her character is very sarcastic. And she'd come and given us a talk one time, and somebody asked her, well, how, because we knew her as a cheerful, fun woman, but not sarcastic at all. And we asked, well, how did you learn to write that kind of funny sarcasm? And she says, well, all I do, and her brother and sister were both there as kind of her backup, you know, as a support group. And she says, when I started writing my character, I'd think, what would my brother say? What smart-ass thing would he say? And then out it would pop. And we all laughed, and her brother was just beaming. He was so proud to know that he was the inspiration for the sarcasm. But I often wonder, you must know, I mean, all of us know people that are various characters, and I know you expand on the characters you meet, but do you ever sit there and think, okay, this character's a little bit like this person I know. I wonder what I could do to expand on that. I mean, do you think of certain people in your life when you're writing your characters to give them the humor?
I really don't think of real people in my life. I put myself into the character's skin, and it's not necessarily what I would think, but I try to imagine what they would think. And I am influenced by my circle, right? So I'm influenced by the people around me and their senses of humor. I'm influenced by the TV shows that I watch and the sense of humor I see there. I'm influenced by other books. I'm really drawn to books that have humor in them. And so when I go to read a story, a lot of times I read stories that have humor, and I'm influenced by the humor that I see there. And so all of that, I think, influences how the characters get portrayed. But I can't say that I've actually thought, what would my brother say, or what would my mom say, or what? I don't really think that way. But I do try to just get so into the character's skin that I kind of just think what they would say. And I have to tell you, I don't know what this says about me, but I have written a couple stories that come from the villain's point of view. So this book is my newest book, Paris Apart. It's a Western retelling of Snow White, basically, in the 1800s. And it has a Texas Ranger hero, and it has the villainess. Her point of view is in this book. She is an actress, right? Very narcissistic woman, and very belittling of everybody around her. Writing her POV was actually really fun for me because I got to be so wicked, and I'm a very nice person who is not wicked. And so it's interesting how it brings out stuff in you that you didn't know was there. I don't know, maybe I need to put that back away. I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
Out of all the books you've written, what is your favorite character from his?
Oh, what is my favorite character for their humor? I'm going to go with my grumpy guy. Again, it's kind of like the villainess, really getting into that grumpy persona, I think was fun for me to write. And it was in his, when I put myself in his skin, he's not trying to be funny, right? He's just who he is. And that's kind of how it came out. And I do have like the 7 dwarf characters represented by 7 retired cowboys who live at the Diamond D Ranch in here. And I had a lot of fun writing the dwarfish characters to fit. And the guy Jed is my grumpy character. He was my favorite to write. So there's something about being grumpy people. I don't know. That's right. It's my own citizen.
Wish you could do
Right. But too nice to be everybody in my books. I can raise grumpy as a while. Yeah.
But it's also a challenge, right? Challenging.
Yes.
It's like a challenge.
Yes. Anything else? sir.
hit on it, but could you just a little bit about the repetition and a line?
Yeah, so the use of repetition in humor, it can be very effective. You have to be careful with it though, so that it's done with punch. So like the running gag kind of thing, the way it was repetition, but it was done with a little bit of a twist each time to make it funny. You can have two characters who, like, let's say they're brothers, they know each other well. You all have inside jokes with your family, right? There's something that you say one thing and they know exactly what you're talking about, right? You can use stuff like that as repetition, to bring up, all he has to say is Wisconsin. And everybody knows what he's talking about, right? And so you can have a conversation and all of a sudden he looks at you and says, Wisconsin. And you just know. And then it can be, like 5 chapters later, you looked up Wisconsin. And so you can use that and make it funny, but you have to make sure that you have the foundation built for it so that the readers are in on the joke, so that it makes sense. That kind of answers. I don't know anything funny about Wisconsin. I just got to figure it out. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I want to know, do you start your stories with the end in mind? Like, do you get stuck anywhere along the way, or is it just once you get an idea, you know where you're going, and it's easy to get to the end of it?
It's never easy. Writing is work. I don't know what they tell you, but writing is work. But yes, when I start a story, and part of this is because I'm traditionally published, and so my publisher wants to have a basic synopsis of kind of where the story is going. So I need to know who my main characters are. I need to know, what they're trying to accomplish in the story. I need to know what's going to make them fall in love, because I'm write romance. And then I need to know, usually it's 3 kind of big plot points that are going to happen. That's the big conflict or the things that happen in the story. And then, I do need to know how it's going to end. I mean, we know they're going to end up together, but how is that going to be fresh and different than every other romance you read? So I kind of have to know the end. So I know those big pillars. I know beginning, I know end, I know some big plot points that are going to happen. And then I just kind of sit down and start writing. And I use that as kind of a very general roadmap, so I can still, if the spirit moves me to go over here, I'll go over here, whatever. But I always come back to that roadmap, and usually I stick to it pretty closely. Now, there are other writers that I know very well who don't write like that at all. They are what you call seat of the pants writers, and they just sit down and go. And the thing that they love is discovering the story as they're writing it, and that's what keeps them excited about the story. I am way too much of a perfectionist to do that. I have to have a plan. And once I have a plan, then I can follow it and have a little freedom to wiggle within it. But yeah, so different writers do it in different ways, and they're equally effective. The way that I write, I tend to not have to do too much rewriting. Because I've done some planning at the beginning, I stay pretty close to my script, and so by the time I get to the end, it's pretty polished and ready to go. A lot of the times with seat of the pants writers, they have to do a lot of rewriting because they either write themselves off into a corner that doesn't make sense, or they didn't have time to fully develop this character, so they have to go back and add layers and rewrite it and refine and all that kind of stuff. So it's not one is better than the other, they're just different. And so you have to kind of find what works for you and then do whatever it takes to make it happen. Yes, ma'am.
So you said you're
Yes. So I started so I write Christian fiction. And what I recommend is if you're looking for traditional publishing, whatever genre you write, get involved with some kind of community, usually a national organization. So there's a national organization called American Christian Fiction Writers, and they have a national conference every year where they have editors and agents that come in, and of course they have lots of craft workshops and all that kind of stuff. I started going to those conferences, I think 2005 was my first one, and this was when I was a baby writer, like I hadn't even finished a full book yet. But I started meeting people, and I started learning things, and I started figuring out how the industry works. By 2008, I think it was 2008, I finally had a full novel finished. I had done several short things along the way, but I finally had a full novel finished. Went to that conference, I met both an agent and editor there, but I met my editor there. And manuscript, and they said they came. Of course, this takes like months to happen because traditional publishing is very slow. And so they came back and they said, hey, we really like this story. We like this writing, but the story is too similar to something we've recently published. But there's one thing about this story we really like, this dress shop. Can you write us a story about a dress shop? And in the original story, the dress shop burned to the ground on page 4.
Oh, no.
So I couldn't just change a few things. I had to start from scratch.
Oh.
But that became Tailor-Made Bride, which was my debut novel. So I came back, and the next year I had finished this book, which was supposed to be the sequel to the book that they said no thank you to. And so I made sure that it could stand alone by itself. And so these two books ended up releasing, because this book was written first before this one was. This released in June, and this released in October of the same year of 2010. And so that's how I got in, by going to those conferences. So other people can submit stuff to agents and things like that. I have found, here's the catch-22 of traditional publishing. Editors won't look at you unless you have an agent. Agents won't look at you unless you have publishing experience. What do you do? So what I recommend is go to conferences where you can get face-to-face time with people, enter contests where you know that agents or editors are going to be judges. Do whatever you can to get your foot in the door. Because it happens that people submit queries from agents and they get picked up and that kind of thing. But it's not terribly common. I have. These are all published with Bethany House. Really, really good publisher. They're one of the top Christian fiction publishers out there. They're based out of Minnesota. And I did have my first, Linda knows, my first foray into indie publishing.
Yes.
I have this book that I published.
We were so scared.
I know, I've never done it before, but now I like it, and I think I'm going to do it again. So this one was an indie pub novella that kicked off the series that Linda and several of us, the two Petticoats and Pistols, were in on. Yeah, so that was a fun experience for that. Yes, sir.
Since you are a Christian fiction writer, what is your approach to putting the Christian into the fiction?
Good question. There's a wide spectrum on Christian fiction. Some is just sweet content without really a whole lot of actual overt Christian messaging in it. Others, you have a lot of overt Christian messaging. I'm kind of in the middle. I do have, some would probably consider mine more overt because the way I handle it is my characters are usually Christian. And so just like I'm a Christian, I have a life, it goes on. So they're dealing with life issues and whatever's happening, but they're doing it from a position of being a person of faith. And so there's prayers that happen, there's scripture that gets referenced and stuff like that, but it all has to be done organically to the character so it doesn't sound preachy. So I hardly ever have, I went to church and I heard this sermon and now, boom, I have this epiphany about it. I'm not saying that can't happen, sometimes it does. In fact, I didn't bring a copy of it, Stealing the Preacher was a finalist for the Christie Award, which I was telling you was the highest award in Christian fiction. Had a preacher as the main hero, and so there was some sermonizing going on with him because that was his job. But you have to be very careful that you're not coming with an agenda, right? It needs to come from an authentic place where the message just resonates with readers as being true to who the characters are. Not like, I have an agenda to push, and I'm going to use this story to push my agenda. So you have to find that balance, and different people have different amounts of what I call spiritual content in their stories. Mine tend to have a little bit more than just the sweet content. It is very sweet, so you won't find any swearing or sexual activity or anything like that. So. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for being such an attentive person.
You have the best humor of anybody, and I read that very first book of yours. Yeah, the Tailor-Made Bride, and laughed. Oh my gosh, I laughed all through it. You But another thing that strikes me about the project is you have this bunny, and then the very next line will have a love yourself.
Yeah. Well, the full emotional experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, she has her books for sale after the meeting is over, and they're also very good. Also, I forgot to mention that if you brought things for the library display, give them to Susan. Is Susan still here? Oh, okay. Okay. She said, because I crossed that for. So, yeah, I know several people brought things, so give them to Susan. So she's going to handle the displays, and this is going to be so nice. KJ and I went and looked at the cabinets, and there's a long one in front, and there's two sides, and there's lots of room, I think, for, but, so if you brought a book to put in, or paper thing, bookmarks, whatever you brought, just give them to Susan. And okay, so it's time for member news. Does anybody have any okay?
I sold a few poems to a couple different magazines.
Oh,
Coming out first part of next year. And then I got a couple coming out in the horror magazine also.
wonderful. Oh, good.
And
Thank
I'll be able
you.
to actually buy a cup of coffee with the money.
Great. That's wonderful. Does anybody else have anything?
Linda,
Yes.
I just want to share that I'm actually, I know some of you experienced the workshop I did, but I've actually been asked to do a poet residency at a private school in South Carolina next month, September.
Okay. Okay.
I've been writing blogs for GBOs. It sounds impressive, but it's not. They are always accepting blogs for their monthly thing, so if anybody wants that information, they're paying like a little bit for them. And it's just fun to practice my writing. Good for GBOs. For GBOs, yeah. Just kind of along with their theme of what they do at the store, but it's been fun to just have that outlet and practice and get a couple bucks for cheaper and stuff like that.
Credits.
That's good. Okay. Does anyone else? Okay. Oh, good. Oh.
Sitting among you guys, I'm like, I was like, I read like, expert here, I was like, oh wow, like that, what's this? So mine is just comedy essays, it's called Good Talk, Good Talk.
Oh, great. Great. Okay.
I don't remember this, but I do want to remind everybody about the
Yes.
So I was wondering so our next meeting, every year, y'all, they do the crafts, arts and crafts fair or festival or whatever here, and every But if not, then we're gonna have to think about AI narration, which is also.
Oh,
Now,
good.
so anyway, we really
Good, yeah.
No, it's the same as, you know, you're just a regular program, or it's part of our regular membership, just in a different location for September.
When you tell me the location,
Is the science spectrum? It's on the loop, like between Indiana and University.
Yeah,
second Saturday of September?
Second Saturday.
yes.
Second Saturday.
Yes, yes. Does anyone else have anything? Do you want to enter, we got a few seconds, if you haven't entered the raffle, anyone want to?
Everyone knows that like, the people who get last win, right?
And come and tell them about our nonprofit status.
I was wondering if you were going to Somebody's like, oh, I don't know, everyone just going to be
Oh, yes, I do.
So, after a couple of hiccups, Caprock Writers Association Alliance, Writers and Illustrators Alliance is now an official nonprofit. Yes.
Lots of hard work. We got it.
Yes, we got it. So, very proud of that.
Oh, me too. So remember to bring school supplies if you have them, or, you know, the dishes and cups and stuff, to the next meeting. And I had a bunch at home and I bought them. It was too much to carry. So, next meeting at the science spectrum. Yeah, everybody's got it. And it'll be in the newsletter. So, I think the October might be there too. But I have down that we don't, that they wouldn't let us do October.
Oh, really? Okay.
Where you pay, I don't know, okay, lunch is at Picasso's.